I always thought my wedding would be the happiest day of my life. I never imagined it would become the moment I finally showed my family who they'd underestimated. But to understand what happened at that reception, you need to know how I got there. My name is Isela Tran, and I grew up in Austin, Texas, under the crushing weight of my father's standards. Jonathan Tran wasn't just respected, he was practically royalty in the world of real estate, having built Tran Holdings into a powerhouse across the Southwest. Every family dinner was more like a board meeting. Talks of market flips, zoning laws, and million-dollar deals. And always, my older sister Michelle was at the center of it all, his golden child, his sponsored person. But me? I was the artsy one. At least, that's how my father dismissed me when I chose software development over business school. "You're too smart to waste time behind a computer screen," he said. "Coders work for CEOs, Isabel. They don't become them." Still, I followed my instincts. While Michelle took her place at Tran Holdings, I pursued a degree in computer science at Stanford, graduating top of my class at 26, an achievement my father ignored. He was too busy flying to New York for Michelle's promotion to COO. Over the next 4 years, I worked at tech startups from San Francisco to Denver, quietly building experience. At every family holiday, I'd get the same passive-aggressive comment. "So, still hopping between jobs?" They didn't know I was laying the foundation for something big. In a tiny apartment above a coffee shop in Boulder, I began coding what would become AegisCore, a next-gen cybersecurity framework that used AI to preemptively detect and block evolving threats. No one believed in me, except my college roommate Layla, who became my first hire after I secured angel funding. When I got engaged at 30, I kept the success of AegisCore to myself. Even as the company grew to 60 employees and closed a $90 million 0-cent Series B round, my parents still treated me like a wayward child. So when my father made a snide remark during the wedding toast, well, at least one of my daughters made it, I took the mic and smiled. "I'd like to thank everyone for being here, especially my investors. AegisCore just closed a $90 million 0-cent deal last week, and yes, I'm the CEO." The silence was delicious. Michelle dropped her glass. Now, that was a wedding day I'll never forget. "I don't really get what you're building," Layla confessed as we struggled to assemble cheap desks in our first office. "But I've never seen you this alive." The next 2 years flew by in a haze of late-night coding, nerve-wracking investor pitches, and grinding through setbacks. My company, now called AegisCore, slowly evolved from a passion project into a rising force in the cybersecurity world. Our first breakthrough came with a mid-sized credit union in Arizona, then a healthcare provider, then, quietly, an inquiry from a federal agency. That was when I knew we were onto something big. But I kept it all under wraps. At family gatherings back in Austin, I still wore the mask of the quirky younger daughter. When my father toasted Michelle's latest expansion deal or her magazine feature, I smiled politely and passed the potatoes. When uncles and aunts asked how my computer thing was going, I gave vague answers like, "It's coming along." Then I met Eli Navarro, an architectural designer based in Santa Fe with wild curls, rough sketches always peeking from his backpack, and a heart that didn't care about surnames or share prices. The first time we met, he thought Tran Holdings was a law firm. "You're surprised," I teased him when he finally Googled my family name. "I am," he admitted. "You're nothing like them. You're real." We fell in love over late-night ramen and sketch pads, dreaming of a life where our work made things better, not just richer. When Eli proposed a year later, with a handcrafted ring and a shaky voice, I said yes without blinking. But of course my father had thoughts. "An architect?" he muttered over steak one evening. "Couldn't you find someone in business with him?" "He's designing the new Civic Arts Complex," I replied. "His firm just beat out 3 national chains." My father snorted. "So a fancy construction worker." "Michelle's husband runs one of the largest hedge funds in the state. That's ambition." I looked at Michelle's husband, bland smile, eyes glued to his phone. And then at Eli, who was helping my niece pick out paints for her school project earlier that day. The contrast was blinding. Planning the wedding became a battleground. My father insisted on turning it into a power lunch in tuxedos. My mother, ever the peacemaker, gave in. Even Michelle, in her perfectly tailored suit, pulled me aside. "Just let him have this, you know how he is," she said. "And it's not like you're paying for it." But I was. Every flower, every seat, every glass of wine, all covered by Core's profits. They had no idea, and I intended to keep it that way until the reception. If you've ever had to smile through silence while building something no one believed in, hit that subscribe button. Because what happened next, at the wedding, let's just say, the real vows weren't the only thing that left the room speechless. What no one at that wedding knew, not even Eli, was that Core had quietly gone public just 2 weeks earlier in a massively oversubscribed IPO. My 38% equity stake? Now worth $90 million, 0 cents. And that wasn't even the biggest secret I was keeping. 3 months before the wedding, during one of our routine security audits, I noticed something odd. Tran Holdings, my father's pride and joy, had multiple unpatched vulnerabilities in its outdated cybersecurity infrastructure, the kind my team built Core to prevent. I could have alerted them, I didn't. Instead, I monitored the system from afar. I watched as minor breaches slipped through. Phishing attempts, low-level data leaks, unauthorized access. I ensured nothing critical was ever exposed, just enough to rattle the board and trigger stock volatility. Then, using a network of shell companies, I started buying stock. Quietly, aggressively. By the time the wedding invitations went out, I had acquired 22% of Tran Holdings. My father still thought I was just his idealistic daughter with a computer hobby. He had no idea the woman he mocked over dinner was now one of his company's largest shareholders. The wedding day arrived. Clear skies, mountain breeze, everything looked picture perfect, from the floral arch we built together to the small hand-painted name cards on each table. It was exactly what Eli and I envisioned. But the reception? That was always going to be my moment. I sat at the head table, my fingers gently laced with Eli's under the white linen. My father stood, lifting his champagne flute. His custom-tailored navy Tom Ford caught the light as he walked toward the mic, flanked by 200 guests in designer gowns and tuxedos. The room hushed, even the servers paused. I studied his expression, polished, commanding, but tinged with something colder tonight. This wasn't just a toast, it was an ambush. "When Isabel was born," he began, voice echoing across the ballroom, "I had such dreams for her. The Tran family has always stood for excellence, for legacy." He glanced at Michelle, who gave a small, proud smile. "My father started our company with nothing. I turned it into a regional empire. And Michelle, of course, is continuing that legacy with brilliance and grace." He paused, took a slow sip. "But, Isabel." A flicker of a smirk. "Isabel chose to code a career for people who work for visionaries, not become them." A few chuckles, a few raised eyebrows. I saw Eli shift beside me, fury in his eyes, beginning to rise. I gently tightened my grip on his hand. "Not yet." The real toast hadn't even started. "And now she's married an architect." My father's lips curled. It might have passed for a smile to the untrained eye, but I knew better. It was a sneer. "I suppose we should be thankful she found someone who can at least design the buildings real business leaders work in." Laughter rippled through the room, polite, controlled, the kind you hear in boardrooms, not ballrooms. Michelle's husband chuckled behind his wineglass. Even Michelle, my sister, allowed herself a small smirk. "The truth is," my father continued, voice sharpening like a blade, "some people just aren't made for legacy. Isabel will never amount to anything meaningful. She's been, and will always be, the disappointment of the Tran family." A hush fell. Even the waitstaff stopped moving. My mother stared down at her lap, twisting her napkin like she could strangle the silence itself. Michelle folded her arms. Eli looked ready to throw a chair. I stood, slowly brushing my gown down. My heart didn't race. It pulsed steady with purpose. "Thank you, Dad," I said, lifting my glass with a calmness I didn't feel. Such heartfelt words. I looked at Michael, my CTO, seated discreetly near the AV booth in a photographer's vest. He gave a subtle nod and pressed a key on his laptop. Around the room, the massive LED displays, the ones my father had requested for his corporate-style slideshow, flickered to life. My father turned, confused. What the hell is this? Financial dashboards, stock tickers, news headlines. And at the center of it all, Aegis Chord Technologies, IPO details, national contracts, government partnerships, and one very large number. $90,200,000 0 cents. Ownership. Isabel Tran, 38%. Gasps filled the room. You see, I began, stepping around the table, my voice steady. While you were grooming Michelle to carry your legacy, I was building my own. I paused in front of him. Aegis Chord, maybe you've heard of it? The adaptive, AI-based cybersecurity system, now used by 6 of the 10 largest financial institutions in the country. My father's face turned gray, Michelle's mouth parted, stunned. Her husband was frantically scrolling his phone under the table. But that's not all, I continued, another nod to Michael. The screens changed, now showing Tran Holdings, board meeting logs, stock purchase records, insider documents. 3 months ago, we identified dangerous vulnerabilities in Tran Holdings' infrastructure. The kind my software protects companies from. I could have warned you. I stepped closer, his eyes widened. But instead I watched. Images of minor breaches flashed across the screens. Then the ownership chart updated. Isabel Tran, 22% stake in Stake USA. As of this morning, I said softly, I own 22% of your empire. Tomorrow, even more. I smiled. Because tonight, several board members are announcing early retirement, and they've all agreed to sell to me. Michelle's husband leapt to his feet so fast he knocked over his champagne flute. You can't do this, Dad, she can't do this. Actually, I said calmly, I already did. I turned to the stunned crowd, many still staring at the glowing financials on the screens. Ladies and gentlemen, I began. I'm thrilled to announce that beginning tomorrow, Aegis Chord Technologies will initiate a strategic merger with Tran Holdings. We'll be implementing a full-scale modernization of their cybersecurity infrastructure, streamlining outdated systems, and bringing the company into the 21st century. A few gasps, some applause, mostly disbelief. My father finally found his voice. You planned this, all of it. The timing, the reveal, the shares. I smiled. I learned from the best, Dad. Isn't this what you always preached? Find the cracks, control the narrative, strike when no one sees you coming. Reporters, who had come to cover what was meant to be the society wedding of the season, were now scrambling with their phones, whispering into microphones, live posting headlines like, Bride announces $3.00, merger at her wedding, and she's the CEO. My father's face was the color of a sunburn. Michelle looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. I walked back to Eli, who stood proud, hands tucked in his jacket pockets, eyes full of admiration. You ready to face the cameras, Mr. Tran Navarro? I teased. He grinned. Lead the way, Mrs. Tran Navarro, CEO of Aegis Chord Technologies. The aftermath unfolded exactly as I expected, and a little more. The merger dominated headlines for weeks. Analysts praised the deal, citing it as a case study in stealth leadership and visionary execution. Tran Holdings stock surged once investors realized Aegis Chord was the engine behind the transformation. Michelle was quietly moved into an advisory position. My father? He stayed on the board. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't steering the ship. At our first board meeting together, I slid a folder across the long glass table. Here's the infrastructure upgrade package. I'll need your signature before close of business. He looked at me, long and searching. Then he picked up the pen. You really did it, he said. You built something incredible. I nodded. Yes, I did it without your name, your approval, or your rules. And that's the part that still stings, isn't it? He didn't reply, just signed the papers. At the door, he paused. Your mother wants you over for dinner this Sunday. I smiled. I'll be there, and this time, Dad, I'll give the toast. A year later, Aegis Chord Systems was valued at over $3.2 billion, 0 cents. My father still sits on the board, though now he listens more than he speaks. Michelle found a softer rhythm, running a local nonprofit. And as for me, I rewrote the legacy. And this time, it was one worth inheriting. And my mother? She finally started speaking up at family dinners, not just nodding along, but actually speaking. Eli and I bought a modern penthouse overlooking Boulder's Flatirons, though I kept my tiny apartment above the coffee shop, the one where I built Aegis Core's first prototype. Some nights I still go there. I sit by the old desk, fingers hovering over the same keyboard, remembering the quiet hours when everyone thought I was wasting my time. The media loves to frame it as a revenge tale, the overlooked daughter taking over her father's empire, but to me, it was never about revenge. It was about reclaiming power on my own terms, about showing that success doesn't need anyone else's blueprint. Last week, my father called to ask for my opinion on a blockchain acquisition. "You see things differently," he said. "You see where the world is going." I looked out over the glowing city skyline, from the same corner office he once ruled. "No, Dad," I said quietly. "I don't just see the future, I build it. And that will always be worth more than any legacy he could have left behind." If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, not the pain, the doubt, or the years I spent being underestimated by the people I thought were supposed to lift me up. But maybe that's why I had to tell it. Because I know I'm not alone. So many of us are told we don't belong, that our dreams are too different, too impractical, too far from the safe path. But I'm here to tell you, you don't need their permission to build the life you deserve. If you've ever been dismissed, talked over, or told your value lies in fitting into someone else's mold, leave a comment below, share your experience, tell me what you're building, what you're fighting for, because your story matters too. And if you believe in lifting up those who've been pushed down, in rewriting legacies and reclaiming worth, hit that subscribe button. There's more to come, more stories like mine, maybe even yours. And remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's success, on your own terms.